Welcome to the Miracle You, guiding you on the journey towards finding passion and purpose, and how to discover, create, and live a life by your design. Whether your success has been plentiful or your missed opportunities have been overwhelming, we can help you become a more empowered, masterful person and show you how to share your gift with the world. It's time to inspire change from within with the host of the Miracle You, Vince Kramer.
Hello, imagination. I'm Vince Kramer, your host, and welcome to the Miracle You, where you learn about the magic of living your life by finding the example in real life.
So many things happen in our lives that allow us to be more aware of why we're here, to be more understanding of the mission that we chose or the purpose we chose, to be more understanding of the divine intent that we have in life. All of the things that have happened along the way really are pointing us in a direction, but we might not get the message, or we might not hear the direction that we're supposed to go. We're all here to be. We're here to be everything that we are, to share our energy in the world, to find our gifts and talents and deliver those in a way that others can use their gifts and talents so they can be. We can help ourselves by looking at the energy around us and choosing how we bring energy in to support us on our journey. How do we surround ourselves with the right people? How do we put ourselves in the environment that supports us in our energetic flow, in our direction towards living the life that we're meant to live? I'm with Shana Francesca today. Shana is a professional interior designer, life designer, writer, speaker, and weaver of wisdom. She was born into a traumatic family culture and has spent her life staying curious as to what is possible when we embrace struggle as a part of growth. Shana believes our physical surroundings, the places we dwell, work, and live, are a vision board for our lives. The most intimate of those spaces can often be a reflection of our beliefs about ourselves. Shana Francesca, are you ready to share the magic of you with the imagination?
Oh, yes, I am.
I'm so excited to delve into your story. As I was doing research, you have such an interesting story, and where it's taken you is really, I think, indicative of following your heart and following the things that have happened in your life to take you in a certain direction. So before we delve into the specifics, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do in the world?
Yeah. So I'm an interior designer. That's what I went to school for, my BS in interior design. And what led me to that, and the last, 15, 16 years practicing as an interior designer and then starting my own firm 5 years ago, what led me to that was really the trauma in my life. Really, I started to notice when very difficult things would happen, I would rearrange, reorganize, reset the physical environment around me. Like I was releasing my association with what was and setting the stage for a new possibility, like literally physically setting the stage for what was now possible. And I started to I was a teenager when that was happening. So I didn't yet have the language or the understanding to see how powerful that might be, right? I just kind of knew that it was happening and knew that's where I was being led in my life. And I had all of these tear outs of magazines that I would go to my parents' doctor's office and I would quietly tear out all the sheets that really spoke to me. And I would tape them up on my bedroom walls, and quotes that I would find. And I was surrounding myself with a variety of possibilities, because at some point I realized that going through trauma, we get to the place, I think a lot of people may feel this understanding that if you've grown up in a difficult surrounding, or no matter what, there's always this tension between you and your parents, right? It's part of what helps us to grow. it's how growth happens, is this tension, and how we release our connection, our strong maternal and paternal connection to our parents, and start to establish our own selves. It's what being a teenager really is. And so I started to recognize, like, if I didn't find a way to tap into an infinite world of possibility, that I was in fact duplicating my parents. I was becoming who I didn't want to be. I just kept saying, I don't want to be anything like you. I don't want to be anything like you, but I wasn't doing anything to interrupt that pattern. And so what became that interruption for me was seeking information outside of myself, which now is, morphed into my spiritual practice around meditation and all those things. But that was really the like baby step version of who I am today, and how that kind of interplays with, setting the stage for our lives, then kind of set the stage for me to become an interior designer. And then that has morphed into really life design and a more holistic, intentional approach to that.
It's very interesting. So unlike many of us, you knew at a very young age that you were being called to change things around you, change the surroundings, change the environment to support your inner work, which is very powerful. What was the big wake up call, or where was the moment where maybe it was when you needed to step into changing the environment so you felt differently? Or was it a little bit later in your life where you realized that, wow, I could do this for others also, and I could make a difference in the world?
I mean, there was this kind of catalyst moment for me, and just like recognition that this is a trigger warning for anyone who's listening. I, at the age of 14, 15, was very, very suicidal. I was dealing with a very heavily suicidal ideation. And on several occasions came really, really close, like knife to the wrist situation. And it was in that moment that I recognized I had been listening to everybody else for so long. My parents kept being like, stop organizing your furniture, stop doing all these things, stop. And I was like, but you don't make the rules. You don't make the rules. This is my life. And I'm going to die if I keep listening to your rules. It's literally pushing me into such a small box that I am suffocating to death from your rules. And I cannot survive this way. And so it was like, I just leaned so heavily into what I knew. And what I knew is I needed to be an interior designer. I needed to change my physical environment, and I needed to know how. And that I could do that for other people too. But it really was, I knew that being an interior designer was connected to my soul. And if I did not do that, if I did not follow that path, yes, there was other paths that I could follow, but that's the one that felt so strongly connected to my purpose. And I just had to follow it. I had to follow it because I was suffocating myself otherwise. And so there was just this moment where I was like, nope, I'm leaning fully in. I know that interior designers, I mean, at the time, interior designers fresh out of college were making $35,000 a year. They weren't making any money. This was not me going into this thinking, I'm going to make so much money. It was me going into it like, I have no idea how I'm going to make money. But I just know this is my purpose, and I know I can transform other people's lives if I can help them to see that they get to take up space. And so many of us don't even take up space in our own homes, right? Like, whether you live by yourself or you live with other people, so many of us do not take up space in our own homes. We let all of the doing take up space in our homes instead of all of the being take up space, right? And our home is set up for us to do instead of us being, and just being able to breathe and allow what is meant to come to us, and allow the experiences of life to happen, literally setting the stage for what's possible instead of creating a workroom out of our homes.
You've shared so many things there, so I can already tell you that I wish this was an hour podcast instead of a half hour, because there's so many things that I would like to tap into. One, because in many ways you're like all of us, and in many ways you're so different than most. How did you, we're all rebellious as teenagers as we start finding our own and want to be in charge of our own lives. But to realize that you were being forced into to following a set of rules that weren't in alignment with you is quite different than most. Most children are willing to follow the guidance of those who quote know better.
Yeah.
But you didn't feel that way.
Right.
Can you tell me, and can you share with the imagination, first of all, how it felt to be in that place?
Yeah.
And then where do you think that knowingness came from?
Oh, wow. Yeah, really great questions. To be honest, that knowing came from trauma. And my earliest memory is of trauma. I was 3 years old when I suffered one of a very, very serious trauma. I was sexually assaulted by my babysitter's son. And I have memory of it still to this day, and memory around it. And what came of that and how my life progressed kind of started me with questioning, am I safe with my parents, right? Because they didn't perpetrate it, but it's their choices that led to it. It is their choices that attracted it into my life, right? Because a child can't attract that kind of energy into their life. It's the people they're surrounded by that do. Or at least that's what I believe. Mm-hmm. And then at the age of 15, I suffered another sexual trauma at the hands of my father. And again, like super trigger warning for this episode. It was at that moment that I recognized that my parents had no idea how to be in this world. They were existing from their own place of trauma, and that they were going to pass that trauma down to me. And I was accepting their ways of being as how I should operate, right? If I did not disconnect from that, I was doomed to copy their behavior. I was copying their behavior. So I had to look outside of what was available to me. And I found books, and I found, because I didn't have people around me, right? Who my parents surrounded themselves with was also who I was surrounded with. And they didn't exactly surround themselves with people who were any more healthy than they were. And they were young, right? They were very young. They were like 21 and 22 when I was born. So like, this is not a anger with my parents situation. I love my parents and I forgive them, and my relationship with them is difficult, but I love them very desperately. So I want to make that clear. But that's different. Most people as teenagers, their parents aren't the ones perpetrating the trauma, right? They might be experiencing trauma from bullying from others. And I dealt with that too. I was the product of a traumatic situation, and we were very poor. So I was bullied aggressively. So most people, when they're at home, to some degree, they have a place of safety. I didn't have that. School wasn't a place of safety. Home wasn't a place of safety. I had to create myself I had to create a space of physical safety in my own bedroom. So I would just go and I would lock the door and I would turn on like Beethoven. I had this deep connection to Beethoven's music because there was such beautiful sadness and then such beautiful triumph in it. And I would just use that energy of his music to and just transform that moment. And so for me, teenage years weren't rebellion as much as they were me being a fire breathing dragon and literally lighting my world on fire because it was so unhealthy. So there was like no tether to it, right? So that's where I was coming from, as a place of like, I have no reason to hold on to it. All it's doing is hurting me. So burn it all to the ground, right? And then create your own life. So I think that's where it came from. I honestly, and I just wrote a piece for another interview, and I made that connection. I was like, quite frankly, I think if I hadn't had those traumas, I wouldn't have questioned my parents so readily, and I wouldn't have transformed my life the way that I did. It is that trauma, that pain, that forced the growth. And that's, I say it's so possible to transmute trauma into growth. It's painful, but it's really, really possible.
You know, at Imagine Miracles, we share, if you look back and go to these places where you felt a victim, where things happened that were out of your control. Trauma is such an eye opener, but it's also something that can put someone in a cave instead of
Yes.
moving out like you did. So obviously the things that were created and co-created in your life helped you step into bringing to the world what you're meant to bring to the world. And it's so obvious as you share the story. You know, the first thing about designing your space where you could be was about safety, but then that became your strength also. Could you talk a little bit about the progression of how designing your space or how changing things helped you on that journey? Because then I want to step into how it's made you the interior designer that you are.
Sure. Wait, so first part of the question, could you repeat that for me?
Sure. Could you kind of walk us through the progression of, as you were pulled more towards the reason you're here, your what we call your divine intent of helping people design that space for themselves where they could be. That's your divine intent. So what was the steps that you went through in moving from safety to strength, where you realized that that's what you could do for others also?
Yeah, I think the universe gives us clues. Like, and sometimes we're in a space where we can let them in, and sometimes we're in a space where we're filtering them out, and sometimes somewhere in between. And I think sometimes plenty of times I was in a space of filtering them out, but it started to be this message where the universe was kindly coming back and saying, no, this is possible. No, this is possible. No, this is possible. You are possible, right? And people kept speaking into my life. Like I had a number of businesses growing up. No shock that I became an entrepreneur, but like a lemonade stand and a bracelet making stand and a snow shoveling. And I started out babysitting for single mothers who couldn't afford to pay or would pay very little. And I started to kind of, like, without their permission. And now I realize that probably was very presumptive on my, not probably, it was pretty presumptive on my part. I started like organizing their life, right? Like I would like go into their pantry, like when I would be making Jello for their kids or something. And I would be like, this pantry really needs some zhuzhing. And so I would just start reorganizing it, right? Like paying attention to what I knew about their life and what they used most often. And I would lean into that and I would reorganize this moment. And now I recognize it might have been a little offensive to them, but I was also like 13 years old. So I didn't know any better. But I started just taking these moments and like, and helping people to clarify their life. Really, I was doing it for them. And started recognizing how powerful it was in helping other people, because I think when you're a 13-year-old and you're organizing someone's pantry, they know you're not doing it with malintent, right? And then people started saying like, and I would design. I have a very theatrical background. So I was part of, and went to a mega church growing up. So it was a 2,500 person church and they had 4 plays every year. And I also did some directing and acting and choreographing. And so I was a part of all these like set designs and choreographing these things for different drama groups and things that I was leading. And I started seeing how I wove things together. And this is why I say to people, I'm a weaver of wisdom, but I'm a weaver. I see disparate things and I bring them together, because a lot of them don't necessarily have anything directly to do with interior design. It's how are we being in a space, not just doing in a space, and how do we clarify and get rid of that which isn't serving us. If we've got a piece of clothing that we're constantly tugging, we love it, right? We love how it looks on the hanger, but on our body, we're tugging at it. We're constantly having to rebutton it or pin it, or it's not really serving us, is it? Right? It's bringing anxiety into our life and stress into our life. And we want it to work, but it's not meant for us. It's meant for someone else. And when we can release our attachment to that thing, then we make space for other possibilities, right? Not just other things. We make space for other possibilities in our life. Maybe finding another piece that's already in our closet that we actually love on our body instead of on the hanger, right? And so I think all of these things together, it's my way of looking at things, of always analyzing and seeing and looking, and to see and discover what's possible, that I think helped me to get to the place where I understood that it's about being in our space rather than doing or acquiring to fill up our space. Does that answer your question well?
Yes. And a
Okay.
perfect lead into the next question that I have for you is, what if you were to describe to someone who's just a part of life, I mean, they're just there, could you explain the difference between a physical surrounding that's put together for your being and a physical surrounding that's put together for your doing? Could you explain the difference?
Yeah. And it's really different for everybody. And that's why sometimes people ask me, like, how do you determine, what are the questions you ask a client? And I'm like, I don't know until I get into their home. I don't know until I'm sitting in front of them. I don't know until I breathe into their space, until I feel them in their own space. And it's a little voyeuristic, right? Because I need to like watch them operate in their own space. And I'm listening to them, but I'm also watching them, and feeling their energy in their own home. But I think when you set up a space for being, we're not looking at it from a place of efficiency, right? But a place of flow, right? And when you think about meditation, you think about flow. A lot of times what I love to do is like close my eyes and imagine how I would walk through a space or move through a space, right? If I know someone, like, okay, for instance, there was a client that I worked with about 1.5 years ago, just pre-pandemic. So I guess about 2 years ago now. And when I walked into her home, I looked at her and I said, you live here, but you're not living here, are you? Right? You're not experiencing this space as home, as a place of safety. And like emotional safety, I don't mean physical safety. She wasn't in any harm's way. I mean emotional safety, spiritual safety, all of that. Right? And she had like things, there was things everywhere and everything was within arm's reach, right? But it wasn't actually working for her or her daughter or her husband. And we actually ended up like clarifying and moving into, okay, does this actually have to be there, right? Does this actually have to be within arm's reach in the doing, right? So that we can do as easily as possible, because life is not about necessarily what's easy, because easy isn't growth. We have to interrupt our doing patterns so that we can understand how to be. So can we move this piano that your daughter practices on twice a week? Can we move it somewhere else in your house, right? Does it have to be in the living room? You know, like challenging our ways of doing things and understanding that there's infinite number of possibilities and it's not this or that, right? That's a false dichotomy. It's any infinite number of possibilities. And when we sit down and we lean into that, we were able to open up her space. We actually put more furniture in her space. It actually flowed better. She could now have people over. And I know her to be a dancer. We met, I was a semi-professional salsa dancer for 4 years, and we met dancing. And so I asked her, one of the questions I asked her was like, so do you have random dance parties with your daughter? She's like, of course I do. And I was like, okay, well, we need to set up this space so that it enlivens a random dance party, right? Like it's bringing that energy to the table, that kind of spontaneity, that kind of being, right? Because a random dance party is about being, not about doing. Mm-hmm. And so we were able to like infuse her space in her home with that. So It's dependent on each person. It's dependent on who you are. So I sometimes feel like I'm asking clients really random questions, or at least they feel like they're random. But because who walks up to a client as an interior designer and is like, hey, do you have random dance parties?
Right.
It doesn't feel relevant, right? But it is relevant, right? So like leaning into who we are is a huge part of the process.
So before my next question, I want to share with the imagination that everything that you shared right there is a perfect example of understanding energy and understanding the truly the last couple minutes of your share there was all about quantum physics and what quantum physics tells us how we live in our day-to-day lives and how to use energy. So I just want to make sure that the imagination caught that and understand what you just shared was really an excellent example of describing a very complex science in a very down-to-earth way. So thank you so much for that. I have to ask, and I think you probably have already explained it some, but I really want to our live-in vision board. Could you tell us more about that?
Our homes being a vision board for our life. I've really been leaning into this understanding because so much of our culture is around hustle culture, right? Let's get done, let's manifest, right? And I've taken a little issue with that word manifest because I think it's been hyper masculinized in a toxic way and in a way that feels like, and I'm not saying that everyone's using this word this way, right? So I don't want to like interrupt anyone's ownership of that word, but for me, I've taken a little ownership, like issue with how that word's being pushed forward in some ways. It feels like people are strong arming the universe into doing what they envision as possible, and the reality is that we have no idea what's possible. And that is where the power is, right? That there's infinite number of possibilities in every given moment, right? Infinite number of possibilities. And so for me, the way I look at it as our home being a vision board for our life is the embracing of the quantum realm, right? Like creating that space as the platform, as the stage for infinite number of possibilities, right? And so when we step back from how it is now and we question, right? When I come into my front door, am I seeing the back of a piece of furniture, right? Because psychologically, that can create a barrier in our minds, right? I'm running up against this physical barrier, right? And us having, or is there a piece of furniture we're constantly walking around? Again, we are not allowing ourselves to take up space. We're allowing material, what we have manifested as a piece of furniture that's required, right? We're allowing that to force us to move around it rather than allowing ourselves to take up space in this moment, because space is infinite, right? But we pretend it's finite. And there's infinite number of possibilities, but we pretend it's finite because we attach specific meaning to a specific way of being, a specific way of doing, and we form these patterns. And so we've got to interrupt those patterns. We've got to question those patterns. We don't have to, but we can. We can question those patterns, and we can say, you know what? I don't want to walk around this dining room table and bump my leg on the corner in the middle of the night anymore when I want to get a cup of water. I'm going to find another possibility, right? Maybe I can flip-flop my living room and my dining room. I don't know. We can ask these questions. What is possible? Right? What is needed? How are we using space? Are we even using space, or is it there for the validation from someone else, right? Like we get to ask all these beautiful, interesting questions. We get to challenge, and we create our home as the stage for infinite possibility. And it's not finite. It changes as we change, just like our purpose changes as we gain understanding of intention, understanding of our purpose, and our purpose changes as we gain wisdom and understanding. When we address our home from a place of intention, of awareness, right? Rather than unconscious patterns of doing, it transforms everything. And then we get to walk into our home and feel joy rather than stress, because we've interrupted this pattern of stress that's happening by walking around. I mean, we don't realize how much a pattern of stress is created by constantly bumping our leg on the corner of a piece of furniture, but it is. And it also becomes an attachment to our pain body, which is a whole nother thing.
That's a whole
right?
other story. Yeah.
That's a whole other story, right? And so interrupting these patterns and asking these questions is really, really vital. It's why I really need to be in people's homes, so that I can understand what's possible as a vision for their life today. And we can interrupt those patterns that they may not be able to see.
What a perfect metaphor for our inside world, and the blocks that we put there, and the flow that we take away from ourselves inside. Believe it or not, we're getting close to the end of our time, and I would love for you, you've shared so much already, but I know that there's one piece of guidance that you want everybody to take away from today. What would that be?
Curiosity and intention, awareness, understanding that there's an efficient way to live, and then there are infinite number of options that are available to us. And we can interrupt the patterns in our life just by being curious. What if I take this road instead of that one on my way to work today? What might I experience or see? I might come across a beautiful bird or a tree or something, right? How can I interrupt? How can I get curious in my life in little ways and build on that curiosity? And as we build on curiosity, we expand intention. And when we expand intention, we can expand awareness. And all of these things build on one another to create a beautiful vision for our life, and to help us to understand infinite levels of possibility.
Breaking the patterns, breaking the
patterns
is so important for each and every one of us. As a whole, especially in the US, we allow our patterns to take us into really non-living. And thank you for sharing what you shared, because no matter your age, living is meant to happen up until the day that you die. And so many of us give up so early.
Yeah.
Shana, how can people get in touch with you and learn more about you?
Sure. There's a whole bunch of ways. My website is consonate.world. That's CONCINNATE.world. Also they can connect with me via social media. We're on Twitter at Consonate World, on Instagram at consonate.world. And consonate is a real word, actually. It essentially means harmony by design. So don't be scared of it if it tries to autocorrect you. So there's a number of ways there that they can get in contact with us.
Excellent. All that information will be available on Shana's show page. Just go to themiracleyou.com and look for that information. I'll make sure all those ways are available so you can get in touch with Shana. Shana, thanks for sharing your story. The story of bringing trauma into strength was so powerful. And I love the way that you bring the concepts of energy into your day-to-day life, and also the way that you're able to explain it. Once we understand energy and how much we're in control of our lives, we're truly are the creators of our reality instead of being along for the ride. So thank you for your time today. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you, Vince. I really love this conversation.
Oh, and maybe we'll have another one, because there's so many questions that I want to ask you. So I do appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you, Vince.
On behalf of my wife and business partner, Mary, the entire team here at Imagine Miracles, we want to wish each and every one of you a miracle day.
You've completed this episode of The Miracle You, but we have plenty more to help you discover your own personal passion and purpose. Head over to themiracleyou.com for free resources to assist you on your journey, as well as register for our free webinar, Discover Your Miracle Life, 3 mind-awakening steps toward your unique purpose, or apply for a one-on-one Your Life, Your Way breakthrough session and discover your next best step on your journey. All available exclusively on our website. That's themiracleyou.com. We look forward to sharing more experiences of passion, purpose, and life by design next time, right here on The Miracle You.